Last week, the FCC restored Title II classification of broadband providers. This is known as net neutrality, and it's something that Tom and I have been talking about on the rundown for a very long time. This move means that the FCC is once again the power to enforce service levels and protect against national threats. But it also changes the way that consumers and service providers interact in this whole broadband space. Neutrality was a very popular move in 2015 when it was first introduced, but it was repealed by our friend and yours, Ajit Pai, in 2017. The decision was largely seen as positive to restore it, with critics merely claiming that the FCC should have had an explicit mandate from Congress instead of making the move on their own. Frankly, I think pretty much everyone except the broadband providers is cheering this, right, Tom?
Yeah, you're right, Stephen. Hold on a second. Let me take a quick drink out of a reasonable sized coffee cup with no branding on it. Okay, now that we've gotten that out of the way, it took you long enough. All you've got to do is go online and Google John Oliver net neutrality. The piece he did on this is 7 years old. End of story. You should definitely go watch that video because it is one of my favorite ways that a comedian makes news make sense, and also the scathing analysis of our friend Ajit Pai is spot on. Because the original reason why net neutrality was repealed was basically a political consideration. Because someone decided that businesses should not be fettered by things like regulations when it comes to protecting the customers. Because as pointed out in John Oliver in that particular criticism some 7 years ago, rather than enforcing things like making sure that your provider doesn't institute a data cap for no good reason, they should just put a disclaimer on there saying that they won't do that. Which, no company has ever gone back on any disclaimer that they've ever added, right? You're right, they all have. One of the things that caused a huge problem and made the administration want to take a look at this was the fact that we all spent about 2.5 years kind of stuck in our houses, and we had to live with what these internet service providers were giving us and how they were treating us. I think you may remember that shortly after the pandemic started and everyone was schooling from home through Zoom and WebEx and other platforms, suddenly all of the internet service providers were more than happy to lift any data caps that they might have had. And then as soon as it was reasonable, they put them right back in place because, oh yeah, you guys shouldn't be using that much stuff. What's happening now is that the FCC is stepping back in to be the arbiter between corporations that want to gouge people for every cent that they have and people who have sense. And I think that's a good thing. And here's the reason why. Because corporations should be regulated, especially when it's a service that is necessary for the operation of our world today. I challenge you to go find somebody out there who works in a job that is not a salaried position and ask them how they get their schedule. I guarantee you it's either done in an app or it's done in some form of online situation where the company just assumes that everybody has a cell phone now because everybody does. Broadband is no longer a nice thing to have like it was when Stephen and I were growing up. It is an absolute necessity, like healthcare. You know what? People need to have unfettered access to the internet without fear of restriction, without fear of, metering or anything like that. What this essentially does is says to the world, you can no longer get away with trying to nickel and dime your customers for every little thing that they have. Or better yet, it restores those common carrier rules that say you're not allowed to police content because we have a law that says you're not allowed to police content. You can't police content if you are a neutral provider. So this should get rid of all that Section 230 stuff. Who am I kidding? It won't. But this is a win for people who use the internet, for people who believe that internet service providers have way too much power, and for people who do not like to drink out of a 64-ounce coffee mug. So enough said on that.